Does fitness affect enduro racers while they are racing? 100% yes it does. And there's a few different components of fitness that affect riders, and a few different ways that it affects the riding that a lot of riders don't even know about or don't even think about. So hopefully this helps a little bit. So the first thing is oxygen. So oxygen is needed for our muscles and our brain to be able to operate. When we limit oxygen to our brain and to our muscles, we limit their performance. So if you've ever held your breath, don't do it. But if you hold your breath, okay, and you don't get any oxygen, eventually you die. But as you are slowly cutting off oxygen, what starts to happen is you can't think clearly, okay? You can't see straight, you lose your sense of balance, everything starts to deteriorate and disappear. And that doesn't happen just like that. It doesn't go from 100% to zero. It slowly drops off like that as you continue to restrict oxygen. So same thing happens when you're riding, is if your cardio is not very good and you're not very good at getting air in and your body's not very good at getting that air and distributing it throughout your body, then you're going to have a hard time being able to concentrate, make good decisions, and ride the bike how you want to ride. So there's a few things I've got written down here. First thing that's going to happen is your decision making is going to change. Because you're not going to be able to think as clearly, you're not going to make fast decisions. You're going to, when you're in those moments on the track where you need to make a split-second decision, you're not very good at making those decisions. Your brain is under a high level of fatigue because it doesn't have this oxygen, doesn't have its fuel coming in. And so what happens is it's not able to make decisions as quickly, and it's also not able to gather and take in information and process it and come up with solution as fast either. So often what happens is either you won't make a decision, you'll make the decision too late when you're out riding, or you make the wrong decision. And that tends to happen a lot more when your brain doesn't have the oxygen going in that it needs to. So think about like let's say you're riding, right, and you're going through let's say single trail and you've got a couple of tight trees there. When your brain's sharp, it can pick up those micro adjustments to be able to get the bars through the trees and position your body at the right angle so you don't hit the bars on the tree. What happens is when our brain doesn't have that oxygen, those little refinements, those little small decisions, those little tweaks to be able to get the bars through, to change things in a split second when you're moving very fast, that starts to disappear. And you see that in desert racing a lot as well, is guys will make, you're moving along so fast in desert racing, let's say it like Fink, you might be going 130, 140 kilometers an hour. There's so many little split decisions that happen along that Fink track, so many little things that happen that you need to be able to correct and get on top of. And if your brain is not sharp and not ready to go, that's when those tiny little mistakes, it's like before you even know it, bam, you're on the floor, you're up, and then you're on the floor. And that's because that fatigue starts to get in, where those little micro decisions are not being made as well, or not being made as fast. And that's where you get more injuries and more crashes. The other thing is poor line selection. So usually what happens is when your brain is tired, again, you start to make poor quality decisions based on where you're going to go on the track. You don't pick the smart lines, you don't pick the fast lines, you pick the lines that are maybe the easiest to be able to tackle, the ones that give you a bit of a rest, the ones that aren't as technical. So if you're on, if you've got a technical part of the track which might be faster and an easier part of the track is slower, your brain's going to be more likely to go, all right, I'm going to take the easier option today. I'm going to take this easier option right now because it's not up to the task of taking on challenges. That comes into the next part, which is you become a bit more conservative. So with your riding, you start to slow things off. You take less risks out on the track to the point where it's like you know that if you keep pushing, you're going to get hurt, and your brain knows that. So you start to conserve. You start to pick the easier lines. You start to slow off. You start to ride a little bit on the easier side. And that comes to the next part, which is survival versus attacking the track. So at the start of the race, generally everyone's in attack mode because everyone's fresh. Like your brain's fresh, you've got plenty of oxygen in, you're feeling great. So everyone's just attacking and pushing. And then what happens is as that oxygen supply starts to be cut off, you start to slowly drift into survival mode. So now your mindset changes throughout the race. You're not thinking about how can I pick these guys off in front of me or how many more spots can I get. You're thinking, shit, how much have I got left in this enduro? Oh, I've got an hour left. All right, cool. Let's hope, where are the guys behind me? Are they catching up, or can I hold a nice steady gap? You're thinking more defensively. You're thinking about what's happening behind you. You're thinking about just maintaining where you're at and trying to survive, trying to stay where you are, rather than actually trying to push and attack forward. You start to slow down. So as always, when you get tired and you get fatigued, your decisions are shit, but you also start to slow down because you're not as sharp, you're not as focused, you're making more mistakes on the track. And that comes to the next bit, which is you are making more mistakes because you're not as focused. When we're riding, like as much as it's physical, it's very mental. There's so much, because you're moving so fast and the terrain that you're riding on is so uneven and unpredictable. Your brain is working 100 miles an hour trying to process all of these little making all of these little micro decisions to be able to keep you upright on the bike, to make the right decision. So it's as much mentally taxing as it is physically taxing. The problem is when it's physically taxing on the oxygen side, on the cardio side, that affects you on the mental side. Okay, you might not be mentally fatigued, but because physically you're sucking in the big ones, your body's not able to get enough air in, and air is needed for this thing to be able to work well, you make poor quality decisions. You start to slow down, you're not riding as well, and you make more mistakes. So you make more mistakes, you make more crashes, you have more crashes, it's slower. And the hard thing with making mistakes is it makes things harder because you make more mistakes and you have more crashes, which means you spend more time picking the bike up and wrestling it around, which takes even more energy from you, which takes more oxygen and makes it even worse. The next thing that I've got written down is muscle endurance. Okay, that's the other thing that will affect you. So the problem with muscle endurance is the way that it will affect you is you won't be able to hold the positions on the bike that you need to hold. So for example, if you're on the bike and you're trying to hold the attack position, but your legs don't have the endurance to hold you up anymore, what happens is you start to sit down more. And because you start to sit down more, you're not in the attack position. If you're not in the attack position that you're supposed to be in, it makes riding the track a lot harder. If you're going through a whole heap of whoops and you're sitting down when you know you're supposed to be standing up, it makes that section, you're going to be a lot slower, but it's going to make that section a lot harder and a lot more taxing on your body because everything's just going to go through your back and through all of the other muscles. Might not go through your legs because they're sitting down and resting, but that energy that's being soaked up from you hitting all of these bumps is going somewhere. It's just not going into your legs because you're not standing up. So all of that riding coaching you've done, all of the YouTube videos that you've watched, all of the desert racing coaching, enduro coaching, all of the drills that you've been practicing, all that stuff goes out the window because all you're doing is focusing on resting your body and you're putting your body in positions that aren't even helping you to ride the bike. And the thing that sucks about that is it makes it even harder, right? If you're going through a set of whoops, you know what it's like when you're going fast and you've got momentum. As soon as you start to slow down, as soon as you start to not get in the position on the bike that you need to be in, it makes it harder. It makes it more taxing on your body. And because it's more taxing, it uses more energy. It uses more energy, which means you get into less and less of the positions that you need to get in. So it's a vicious cycle. Muscle endurance, you also make more mistakes. So you can imagine going down the Fink track and you're supposed to be standing up, going through the whoops, and you're sitting down, you make more mistakes. The bike kicks out a lot more, you're all over the place, you can't hold a straight line. So your riding deteriorates, you're probably going to lose a fair few spots out on the track. You slow down, which is what I just mentioned. Line selection changes. So at the start of the race, you'll be picking the fast lines, okay? The lines that allow you to be able to be the fastest and be the most competitive. And so even if that's the rougher line, you'll take the rougher line because you know that that's the fastest line. What happens is when your muscle endurance starts to drop off, is you no longer do that. You think about the track differently. You think about the track in terms of where can I rest, where can I sit down, which line's going to be the easiest on my body, rather than looking at the track and looking for the fastest lines. So your thought process of how you're tackling the track and where you're riding changes based on how you're feeling. So all of that track walking stuff, all of that looking at the track, all of that sort of stuff goes out the window. All the line selection stuff, because all you're worried about is just resting, getting your body to recharge so that because it's tired and it feels like shit. The last area is strength. And so this will affect your riding. So first of all, the bike takes a lot of energy to be able to ride. So if you've got a bike, like let's say you got a 500. A 500 might weigh 110 kilos. And let's say you weigh 90 kilos. You've got your 110 kilo bike plus your 90 kilos of body weight on top of that. So that's 200 kilos if you add that together. So you're wrestling around 200 kilos plus all the power of the bike for however long you're riding for. Let's say it's a 3-hour enduro. It takes a lot of energy to be able to do that. So the problem is 200 kilos, like obviously you're not deadlifting and dragging 200 kilos. The bike has its own momentum, but you are wrestling around. It's like 200 kilos with a whole heap of force being thrown down a track and you're trying to steer it and correct it and put it in the right position by using your body and getting into the right positions on the bike. So you are wrestling around a fair amount of that weight. The problem is though, is if you're not strong or you don't have adequate levels of strength, is that 200 kilo bike feels really, really heavy. So let's say that your strength is here, right? And the bike's weight is here. There's a small gap between those two, right? So what's happening is every time you're wrestling the bike around, you're almost redlining your maximum level of strength. So if you're always redlining the amount of strength that you have, that you're going to wear yourself out very, very quickly. However, if you can increase your strength and get your strength up here while the bike weight and rider weight stays here, now the gap's much bigger. Because that gap's much bigger, you're not redlining your strength and your overall level of conditioning every time you wrestle that bike around. So what that means is you've got a lot more energy in the tank to use because you're not redlining. You're not using all of your strength and all of your fitness every time you wrestle that bike around and running yourself into the ground. You've got that bigger gap there. And because you've got that bigger gap there, there's more energy in the tank for you to be able to keep riding and keep racing at the speed that you want to ride at. The other thing with strength is like, if you don't have the level of strength that you'd like, crashes take energy. They take a lot of energy, right? So think about any type of enduro, but maybe more so hard enduro than any other type of racing, is you're picking the bike up off the floor and wrestling it around and dragging it around a lot, okay? So if you've got a 110 kilo bike and you're dragging that thing around, plus trying to get your body weight around on the side of a hill through a rock garden, that's a lot of energy that it's going to take out of you. So again, if you don't have adequate levels of strength, that bike feels really, really heavy or much heavier than what it should. Because it feels heavier than what it should, it takes a lot of energy out of you. So even if the coming sections you've got on the hard enduro loop that you're doing are sections that you can get through easily, if you've got one section which really takes it out of you and really takes a lot of energy, like let's say a rock garden where you're off the bike and you're dragging the bike a lot and you're sucking in the big ones, but you don't have adequate levels of strength there, then it's gonna ruin you for the rest of the sections. Doesn't matter how good your skills are for the rest of the sections. If you've got one section which really takes it out of you, it's gonna ruin you and affect you for the following sections. So, to add to the strength component there, strength is not about being strong or not strong. Okay, a lot of people say like, oh yeah, I'm pretty strong, or yeah, I think I'm pretty strong. It's not about strong or not strong. It's about how strong. It's a sliding scale. Okay, it's like there's a range of strength. There's zero, no strength, and then strong, and then there's everything in between there. Okay, it's sliding scale all the way across. It's not just on one or the other. So when people say, oh, should I get stronger? Chances are probably yes, because the stronger you can get yourself, the lighter you can get the bike to feel. The lighter you can get the bike to feel, the less energy you're going to use when you're riding and racing, which means you've got more energy to be able to keep riding and racing how you want to race, not limiting your racing to how your body's feeling. And then the last thing is, which I already spoke about, which is just being closer to redline all the time. Like if you're going through a rock garden, your strength's here and the bike and rider weight's here, it's going to zap you. Like as soon as you have to wrestle the bike or get off it, you're going to lose all of your energy and all of your strength so quickly because your body doesn't have much capacity to take on that type of load. Whereas if you can use off the bike training, like your gym work, to get yourself a lot stronger and make that gap a lot bigger, it's going to make things a lot easier for you out on race day.